maybe a piece of wood hitting the wall. I went down the basement stairs all the way this time, did a perimeter check around the walls, but again, the basement was empty, so there was nothing to even check. Still, I blew it off. What could it possibly even be? I didn't believe in anything paranormal, so logically, it had to be the house. During the first week of staying in my new house, I had experienced these sounds probably 6 or 7 times. By the 4th or 5th time, I stopped even checking and started ignoring it. That wasn't until I explored the outside of my house. I was just walking around, enjoying the nature scene, when I noticed one of the tops of the basement window wells was missing from the side of my house. It in itself wasn't an alarming find, but just something I needed to fix right away before it rained and flooded my basement. Went out and got a cover from a hardware store and installed it that day. That night, I went to bed early, but woke up at 11 p.m. to another wooden thud sound from the basement directly below me. A second later, I heard something else. This time, it was very distinctly footsteps going from one side of the basement to the other. I was horrified. Part of me was absolutely positive there was someone in my basement, but there was another part of me that thought it could be something I was imagining, or even somehow another noise from the house. I needed to know for sure though. I took my bat that I kept in my room and walked downstairs and over to the basement door. Just before I approached it though, an extremely loud thud came from outside the house. I stopped in my tracks, waiting for anything else. Then I opened the basement door and walked down slowly. Nothing was there. The same empty basement. Looked all around and even waited for a few minutes for more sound, but it was just like every other time when I went to investigate. As soon as I'd open the basement door and look around, it would be silent. I got really uneasy after a few minutes and went back upstairs. Put a chair in front of the basement door so that if there was somehow someone down there, I'd at least have a heads up if they tried to open the door. Next morning I checked the basement again. Something felt different. It was much brighter than usual. Checked the window well and could see from the bottom, the top cover was gone again. I went outside and looked around everywhere for it. It was completely gone. That was enough for me to call the police though. Something was going on. They sent one officer who took notes from me and searched around the basement. He found just as little as I did. I got a new cover for the well and hired a handyman to come out and install bars on the window from the inside. After that, I never experienced any more sounds or noises. I don't know what exactly I was dealing with in my basement. Maybe someone squatting there, or maybe something else. Even now though, 3 years later, I still have that fear in the back of my mind of hearing those sounds again. I moved into my new house last year during winter. It was a beautiful, spacious home with a big backyard. It was my first house ever buying. Moving was a bit of a hassle though, because I was alone, so I had to move everything by myself. I pulled up with the truck early in the morning and shoveled all the snow off the driveway, then started bringing all of the boxes and furniture inside. I finished pretty late, around dinner time. I went back outside and locked up the truck, planning to drop it off the following morning. I don't remember doing much for the rest of the night. I probably just watched something on my phone, but I didn't have my bed set up yet, so I slept on the couch downstairs. It wasn't the most comfortable couch, but as I was trying to fall asleep, I heard a strange noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone was walking up to my Porsche. I sat up and listened carefully, looking at the front door. The sound stopped just before they reached the door, though. I waited for a while until I thought I was just hearing things and ended up falling asleep. In the morning, I woke up to find that the front door was unlocked. I was certain I'd locked it before bed. I checked for any signs of someone walking around outside, but there wasn't anything. I dropped off the truck, then spent the whole day unpacking and setting up the rest of the furniture. I had mostly everything done by the end of the day. At 6, I went out for a quick dinner and got home around 7. As I pulled into my driveway, though, I saw something strange in the snow outside my house. I parked and got out. There were footsteps in the snow, leading right up to my front door. I looked all around and tried to follow the footprints from where they came, but they ended by the sidewalk, which had already been shoveled. It could have just been a neighbor wanting to say hi, and that's the excuse I told myself to put me at ease. I finished the last of the unpacking, and before bed, I checked all the doors and windows. I walked up to the front door and immediately noticed it was unlocked again. I got my key and tried it, making sure it worked and couldn't be unlocked without it. But sure enough, everything seemed to work just as it was supposed to. I was confident I had locked the door and kept it locked all day. I just didn't understand why this was happening, though. Nothing was missing from the house, and there were no signs of an intruder. I mean, it was cold, wet, and snowy outside. If someone had come inside, they would have left watery shoe prints everywhere. I made sure the door was locked, then went up to my bedroom to shower before bed. As I was getting out of the shower, though, I heard something downstairs. It was soft and hard to distinguish. Usually, I would assume it was nothing, but with everything going on, I had to check. I got dressed and walked down the stairs slowly. I turned the corner around the stairs, and right in the hallway was a man. He was facing me, standing still, with the front door opened behind him. I was in some sort of shock, frozen in place. After a moment, I sprinted back up the stairs and locked myself in my room. I didn't hear him following me, but I was still terrified. Then I heard footsteps walking through the rooms downstairs. I took this chance to call the police as the man downstairs continued walking around. After maybe 2 minutes, I heard the front door slam shut and the footsteps leaving the property. The police found nothing of use and suggested putting up security cameras and changing the locks on the door. I did both, but the man never came back. I almost wish he did, so that I could catch him on the cameras, because now I feel like every day I'm just waiting in fear for him to come back. I'm not sure what he was doing or wanted to do, but I hope I never have to know. I moved across the state to a newly built house. My previous landlord decided he wanted to sell his house, so when our lease agreement was up, he kicked me out. I decided to also lease this new house, but I was honestly really excited for this place. As soon as I moved in, though, I noticed my neighbor across the street staring at me several times within the first couple days. He was a middle-aged man, but didn't seem to ever be away from his house. I tried to brush it off, assuming that maybe he was just curious about the new person in the neighborhood. But the more I saw him, the more I realized there was something off about him. He never spoke to anyone, he never smiled, and he never left. He just stayed in his house, watching. I would catch glimpses of him through my window, and see him standing in his driveway at odd hours of the night. It was starting to freak me out. One night, as I was settling in for bed, I heard a noise outside. It was a scraping sound, like someone dragging a heavy object across the ground. I peeked out the window, and there was my neighbor, dragging what looked like a large ladder across his lawn. It was really late. I had no idea why he would be needing to do any work on his house at this time. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid because I was in a new place surrounded by new people, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about my neighbor. I tried to calm myself and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I saw him outside again. This time, he was standing at the end of my driveway, staring at me through my window. I pulled the curtain shut and I tried to ignore him, but the feeling of him watching me gave me chills. I didn't like that he was by my driveway either, so I quickly got into my car and pulled out of the garage. He was back in his yard by then, but he watched me as I drove away. Things grew a lot worse from here. One night, as I laid in bed, I could clearly hear someone walking in the grass in my backyard, which was fenced in. I got up and looked out the window. The footsteps stopped. I waited in my bed for probably 30 minutes, but I didn't hear any more footsteps. I got up and checked the window one more time to be safe, and far back in the yard was a figure. It was hard to make them out because it was so dark, but there was definitely someone standing there, watching me. I backed away and called the police, but the man had left before they arrived. I told them all about my creepy neighbor, but they told me there was no evidence of any wrongdoing and that my neighbor had never been in trouble with the law. I was basically on my own unless something more serious actually happened. I started to take precautions, locking my doors and windows and avoiding being outside as much as possible. Even then, I didn't feel much safer. I'd been at the new house for almost 2 weeks at this point, and even thought about breaking my lease agreement. Then something happened. I got home from work late and pretty much went straight to bed, but in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of something thud against the side of the house. It sounded like it was right up against the wall outside my bedroom though, which was on the second-story floor of my house. I slowly got out of bed, heart racing in my chest, and pulled the curtains back from my window. I jumped back and screamed, seeing my neighbor's face staring at me from just inches away from my window. He was standing on a ladder, trying to look into my bedroom. He quickly climbed down and ran away. I called the police again, and just a few minutes later, they caught him trying to get the ladder down. While he didn't admit to what he was doing, it was very obvious. In the following days, one of my neighbors came by and explained that they had some weird encounters with that neighbor guy as well. They said they saw him looking through their windows as they were coming home from work one day. Part of me wonders if they could have prevented this whole thing from happening to me if they had just reported the guy. But either way, it's over now. As a fairly young adult, I had just purchased my first home. It was a small house on the outside of town, and I hoped to do some renovations over the years and then sell it for a profit. I was also just excited to have my own space for once. The previous owner had left the house completely empty, with no furniture or personal belongings left behind. I was moving from a one-bedroom apartment, so I had barely enough things to even fill a single room. I was able to complete the whole move in half a day though. In the end, the house still looked really empty, which I knew it would, but it was kind of weird to live in a somewhat empty house. The first night was good, but I had some trouble sleeping due to some noises the house was making. It was a pretty old place, being nearly 70 years old. It had a few renovations done, but the frame was probably just creaky and weak. That morning, I stayed in the house all day, unboxing everything and setting a few things up, like the TV and all of my kitchen appliances. By 8 p.m., I felt the relief of doing everything I needed to do for the day, and I sat back and turned on a movie. A few minutes into the movie, a large thump vibrated the ceiling, like something heavy had dropped on the floor above me. It caught me off guard, making me flinch. I had no idea of anything heavy that could have fallen. I went upstairs and took a look around, but the few things I had in the rooms were just as they had been when I set them up. It was such a loud sound though. I mean, I even felt it vibrate the house, so I knew it happened, but I had no idea what it came from. I double-checked everywhere on the second floor, and even the first floor, but I came up short again. I went back to the movie. The sound still lingered in my mind. It even made me wonder if there was some sort of major problem with the house that I didn't know about. Once the movie was over, I shut everything off and dragged myself to bed. When I woke up though, I was confused. It was the middle of the night, and there was a rhythmic creaking noise coming from the hallway. I got up and went to my bedroom door, still hearing the creaking. Right when I opened the door, my heart stopped. The attic door was hanging down, swinging back and forth as if it had just been opened, and there was a ladder coming down from it. I ran past it, going downstairs to call 911, but not even halfway down the steps, I hear someone start running across the floor. I froze in place as they opened the back door and ran away. I quickly went down and locked it behind them, then called 911. While I waited for the cops to show up, I checked the rest of the house just to be safe. I climbed the old ladder up to the attic, seeing the surprising amount of things. Furniture, boxes, brash, all looking really old. When the cops got there, they said it was most likely someone living in my house while it was vacant. They assured me that they were probably gone for good, but to just make sure everything stays locked up for a while. Whoever was living in my house hasn't come back, but there's always this terrifying feeling I get every time I come home from work. Like someone could be hiding in my house right now, without me even knowing. Before we get into this next story, I want to take a moment to talk about the sponsor for today's video. Aura is an all-in-one digital security service providing continuous monitoring of your personal data, along with quick resolutions to help you resolve any potential threats. Along with this, Aura's apps can encrypt your Wi-Fi connection to aid in keeping your home devices secure. Personal identity and data theft is unfortunately very common now, having affected nearly 1/3 of all U.S. citizens and continuing to affect 15 million U.S. citizens every single year, costing billions of dollars. With Aura, you can be assured you have the greatest security and prevention. While this can all sound complicated to set up, it's actually extremely simple. I signed up for myself in less than 5 minutes, and after signing up, I was able to have Aura scan and remove my personal data from all over the internet, including scam centers, the dark web, and data brokers, by just clicking a few buttons. These companies make a profit off of your private information, so removing your personal data is extremely important. After this, Aura set up continuous monitoring on all of my data, ensuring any issues can be resolved rapidly by notifying me the instant something comes up. I am genuinely impressed with this service, and the peace of mind it brings me is above everything else. By using aura.com/whispered or scanning the QR code, you can get a completely free 14-day trial, allowing you to see if your personal data has been leaked, remove your data from multiple large platforms, and securely monitor your personal identity. I strongly suggest everyone to try it out and keep your identity secure. This happened to me a couple years ago, after I just rented and moved into a new house. The first week went by quick with no issues at all. I unpacked, bought some new furniture, and got everything set up the way I wanted. The main reason I moved there was because I got a work-from-home job, so having a quiet place to work was important. This house was far from others. It gave me a peaceful work environment. One morning, after making breakfast and sitting down to work, I got a knock at the front door. I walked over and answered it. It was my landlord. He was smiling and asked me how I was doing. "Yeah, I'm doing good, Gip," I said, still unsure why he was here. He tried to make small talk for a minute before saying he was just checking in on me, and then he left. I went back to work, but that was definitely weird. I didn't mind him being friendly, but he could have just texted me instead of randomly dropping by the house. The rest of the day went by, and I'd forgotten about it. After dinner, I went for a walk around my street. My neighbors' houses were well spread out, though I never actually got a chance to see the other houses in the neighborhood. I walked for maybe half an hour, then turned back. As I rounded the corner toward my house, I saw a car parked on the side of the street. It wasn't directly in front of my house, but there weren't any other houses nearby. When I walked up and past it, I realized it was the same car my landlord had in the driveway when he was showing me the house, but there was nobody in the car. I hurried up the driveway and went inside. I looked out the windows, trying to see if he was in the yard or something, but I didn't see him. I wasn't scared really, but just uncomfortable and weirded out by the situation. I had just walked around the whole neighborhood, so I didn't know where else he could even be other than the house. After a while, I stopped looking because I wasn't seeing anything. Another hour or so went by, until a knock came from the front door. Looking out the peephole, I saw it was my landlord again. I sighed in annoyance and opened the door. He was smiling again, asking how I was doing. "Yeah, I'm still good, thanks. You just make sure to let me know when you plan on dropping by next time, though," I said politely, trying not to be rude. He apologized and said he just wanted to make sure I was happy with the place. I smiled and said I had to get back to work, then shut the door. Something about that interaction, the way he talked and the way he looked at me, was just really creepy. Obviously the guy didn't understand social cues, but I don't know, he just rubbed me the wrong way. I went to bed that night, thinking of the best way to tell him I want to be left alone. He was my landlord, and this was technically his house, but there are rules they have to follow when renting it out. I fell asleep, still unsure of what to do, but I was woken up not long after. It was well past midnight when a knock on my door forced me up. I turned on the lights and went downstairs, the whole time thinking that if it was the landlord again, I would be furious. I checked out the peephole, and sure enough, it was him again. I swung open the door. "What are you doing here? Can't be here right now. Need to leave," I said strictly, barely holding back my anger. That's when I saw he was holding a duffel bag. He explained that there was an immediate repair he needed to do on the pipes in the basement. He said he had an alarm hooked up on his phone that went off saying there was a minor gas leak. None of the alarms actually went off in the house though, so this was really suspicious. I told him I'd just call someone in the morning and went to close the door when he suddenly forced his body inside, pretending to not notice I was closing the door. I just stood there now, not knowing what to say or do. He looked at me, fully in my house, and smiled. "It'll only take a minute." He put down the duffel bag and asked me to follow him so he could show me the problem with the pipe. He opened the basement door and started walking down, and I hesitantly followed down a few steps before I thought of something. "Hold on, and go get my phone so I could take pictures of it. Be right back," I said, hurrying back up the steps. Thankfully, he stayed. I rushed to my room and got my phone and keys, then went to the front door. But before I left, I quickly went over to the duffel bag and opened it just to make sure I wasn't wrong. Inside the bag, there were no tools. At least, not normal ones. I didn't know what they were, and I didn't have time to figure it out. I heard him coming back up as I rushed out of the house and into my car, driving away. I called the police as I drove to a parking lot nearby. What happened after this still bothers me every day. My landlord was still there when they showed up. However, the duffel bag he came with was not. They never found it. Through everything, all that ended up happening was I was able to move out without having to pay the fee of breaking the lease. Him showing up randomly and being creepy, or even inviting himself in, wasn't enough to do anything. I of course took the deal though, moving out right away. But, in the back of my mind, I know he's out there, probably doing whatever he was going to do to me, to someone else, and there's nothing I can do about it. I moved out of the city in June of 2022. There weren't a lot of options for places to rent, but I was still able to get something decent. I did all of the moving myself with a U-Haul, taking up my whole weekend, but it was worth it. Being in a crowded city apartment was not enjoyable, and I just wanted to have a whole house to myself that wasn't crammed together with a bunch of other people. On the first night staying there, some strange things started happening though. I was unboxing the containers in my bedroom when I heard my phone get a notification from downstairs. I walked down and picked my phone up from the kitchen counter. A text appeared, welcoming me to the neighborhood. It was from a random number. I hadn't met any of the neighbors yet, and I had my landlord's number saved in my phone already, so this was kind of freaky. I didn't respond, and instead just continued unboxing. When I was done with my room, I went back downstairs and started on the living room. I put together the TV stand and finished connecting the couch. I wasn't trying to get everything done in one day, but I did want to get all of the essentials done so I could enjoy the house a bit more. The last thing I needed to get done for the night were the bathrooms. I picked up the box and unpacked some things in the downstairs bathroom, then went upstairs to my bathroom. While organizing my stuff, I heard my phone get another notification. I was kind of annoyed, figuring it was that same unknown neighbor of mine. I organized for another minute, then went downstairs. I walked over to the counter and bent to the couch, but my phone wasn't there. I looked around, but still couldn't find it. I swore I left it on the counter, but I was tired and thought I had to have misplaced it. I checked all of the bathroom, came up empty-handed. Splashing water on my face to wake me up, then figured it would turn up soon anyway, and just continued to organize my bathroom. I had taken the whole week off of work, so I wasn't worried about staying up late or sleeping in too much. I wanted to get done as much as possible before I went back to work though, because I knew I'd be too tired to do much after that. Once I finished organizing the bathroom, I gathered up all the empty boxes upstairs, brought them down to the garage. As I came back inside, I stopped in my tracks. Across the room, I saw my phone. It was sitting right on the counter in plain sight, impossible to miss. My head was spinning. I walked over and picked it up. There was a text from 10 minutes ago. It was a picture of my couch, taken from inside the living room. The couch was fully put together, so this had to have been taken right after I went upstairs. I quickly turned around, scanning the room. I opened every closet and checked behind everything. The house was still mostly empty, so there wasn't anywhere to hide. I was freaking out, questioning everything. At one point, I even walked over and stood exactly where the picture was taken, from right in the middle of the living room. It wasn't until then that my head started working again, and I realized I needed to call the police right away. I opened up my phone, but immediately got another text. It read, "Come outside." The doorbell rang seconds later, making me completely freak out. I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom and called the police. More and more texts came in, demanding me to go outside. They banged at the front door, and then it went quiet for a minute. No texts, no movement outside. Then I heard faint footsteps walking around the house. They got to the backyard and reached the patio, but then it went quiet again. It was silent all the way up until the police arrived. They searched the whole house, inside and out, but found nothing aside from a couple shoe prints. But they could have been anyone's, since the house had been viewed by a bunch of people before I moved in, and I hadn't had a chance to clean the floors yet. It really freaks me out, thinking about how I never heard them walk away. The most disturbing part, though, is that they were inside my house, taking pictures and everything, and I had no idea. I've been living in the same house for almost a year now, and haven't encountered any more situations yet. But how would I even know? They could be stalking me right now without me even knowing it. I moved to Portland last fall. It was a work thing, so I was kind of forced to. The housing prices in Portland were and still are really expensive, so I had to get something away from the city. The house I settled on was on the lesser side of things. It was old and run down. If you took a quick glance, you might even think it was abandoned. For its price, though, I was able to save a decent chunk of cash. I figured I'd be able to renovate it and maybe fix it up so it wasn't so bad. The one thing I couldn't fix, though, was the neighborhood. It was full of houses just like mine and some really sketchy-looking people. Guys were strolling around in ripped-up wife-beater tank tops and had guns very noticeably wedged in their pants. While I saw the neighborhood wasn't ideal when I first came to look at the house, these kinds of people I didn't know would be here. I thought it would be normal, nice people just like me who just couldn't afford a nice place. About 2 weeks into living there, I was taking a walk around the block with my dog, and around halfway through I noticed some guys walking behind me. They were far back, but there was no doubt that they were taking the same turns as me. I glanced back a few times, seeing 3 men, none of which looked like the type to be taking a nice evening walk just for fun. I took a shortcut home to avoid any possible altercations, but just a few minutes later, my dog started barking at the front door. Well, I peeked out the blinds and saw one of the men standing at the door. I looked around for the others, but only saw him. I put the chain latch on the door and cracked it open. "Can I help you?" "Yeah, looking for Chris." He said it confidently, like I knew for sure who this Chris guy was. "I don't know any Chris. I just moved here." I saw him sneak a few looks into my house through the crack in the door. Then he said, "See you later," and left. I knew something was up, but I didn't know what. The next few days, I noticed these same 3 men looking at my house multiple times a day. They'd always be separate and come at different times, but they would stand across the street or walk past my house and very obviously look at my place. I was nervous, but I didn't know what to say if I called the police. I didn't think the police would be of any help even if I did call. Then one night, around 9 p.m., I got a knock at my door. When I looked at who it wasn't any of the men I'd seen before. He knocked again, but I chose to ignore them and just wait for him to leave. I watched as he turned around and threw his hands up in frustration, like he was communicating to someone across the street that I wasn't answering. He turned back around and banged on the door, this time with the handle of his gun. I ran to the kitchen and got my handgun out of my hidden case. I heard a few men talking on the side of my house, followed by someone banging on my back door too. I ran to the far corner of the living room and called the police, while the men outside started yelling at each other. I heard them shuffling around, talking about where to break in. It was one of the scariest things to hear in that kind of situation. But then out of nowhere, there was a gunshot from far away, not from any of the men around my house. I heard them all yelling and scattering away. Police took forever. When they showed up, they basically just said it sounded like a gang trying to flex their territory or something. They offered me nothing helpful. I still don't even know who shot at the gang either, but they seem to be looking out for me, so I really appreciate them. Who knows what they would have done if they had broken in. I moved out of that neighborhood as soon as I could and got a small apartment closer to the city. It feels safer, but after all of that, I'm not sure if I'll ever really feel safe living here.